And I'll begin at once by recalling an exchange I had recently in Colorado Springs with a spokesman of America's evangelical broadcasting wing, a much overrated but nonetheless significant force in American politics. This broadcaster asked me, in response to my own statement of unbelief, he said, "I insist that you answer the following question, and that you answer it with a yes or a no." I braced myself. I accepted the challenge unseen. He said, "You are to imagine yourself in a strange city where you've never been before. You are to imagine nightfall coming on and you to be without friends or succor in this town. And you are to ask yourself whether you would feel safer or less safe when you saw a dozen men coming towards you in the dusk, if you were to know that they had recently come from a prayer meeting."
The late Christopher Hitchens in one of his debates sparked a heated argument titled, "We'd be better off without religion," and I'm going to feature a small portion of that conversation here. It discusses the impact of religion on society, questioning whether faith exacerbates conflict and arguing for the benefits of secularism. He covers several important and relevant topics, which I found extremely compelling to hear him describe: the destructive power of religious divisions and advocates for a mass conversion to secular principles. Then, I'll share a response from John Lennox, an Oxford mathematician and Christian apologist, who offers a unique perspective on what makes Christianity different from other religions, and what makes Christianity unique and beneficial for society. Lennox delves into the differences between religions, the basis of a relationship with God, and the unique aspects of Christianity. He also addresses the common moral principles shared among religions and emphasizes the distinctive offer of unconditional acceptance in Christianity. At the end, I'll provide some additional insights that support Lennox's argument, showing that this is not just a matter of opinion, but rather a deeply thoughtful exploration of the role of religion in our lives. So, with all that said, let's dive in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more thought-provoking content.
This is I think I can justifiably say I'm relaying to you, comrades, friends, brothers, sisters, the challenge that was put by the religious to me. You'll see at once it's not a yes-no answer. You can't give a yes-no answer to that, but I accept it anyway. I said, very well, I won't give a Sesame Street reply, but just without leaving the letter B, I have been in that situation. In Bombay, in Belfast, in Beirut, in Belgrade, in Baghdad, and many other places too. And I won't tell you about all of them, but let me just, as it were, fill in some of those latent blanks. In Belfast, the capital city of one of the provinces of this, our United Kingdom, as everybody here knows, everything, culturally, educationally, economically, politically, socially, has been very gravely retarded for at least a quarter of a century. At least half a century and maybe more since partition, and before that, because partition is both the outcome and the cause of sectarian warfare in this town, by the simple fact that there are people there who are willing to kill not just one another, but one another's children on the basis of what kind of Christian they are. Horrible things are done, not just in pubs and clubs, but on the streets, on housing estates, on university campuses in that city still, despite the relatively good news we've had today, where the situation remains dominated by barbaric sectarian party leaders, on this and no other basis. Both churches demand that their children are sent to separate schools. They each agree with the other that above all things their own children must be protected from the faith of another faith. I don't think I need to elaborate very much more on how horrendous the consequences of that have been and how they are enshrined, by the way, in our own constitution, which mandates that our own head of the church is also the head of the state and of the armed forces, with all the ludicrous Windsor consequences that you get if you found a national church on the family values of Henry VIII. These conditions, which are farcical in England, Wales and Scotland, are tragic and ugly, only a few minutes flying time from where we sit. If I pass on from Belfast to, say, Baghdad, where I've recently been, and without reopening any of the arguments about the rightness or otherwise of the coalition intervention in Mesopotamia, I think it can be granted by any fair-minded person that what was most needed in Iraq after 30 years of fascism and war was a period of reflection, a short interlude of calm during which Iraqis could look about themselves and decide perhaps whom they'd like to vote, perhaps what kind of country they'd like to live in, what kind of federal system they might wish to evolve, and to do so unmolested by violence or terror. The parties of God have vetoed every hope of that process. The parties of God now have the Iraqi people in their jaws, and they're saying to them, it's not enough just to kill foreigners or to rail against Jews or Christians or secularists. That's nothing like enough. It's only in Iraq, not only, mainly, chiefly in Iraq, that it's considered perfectly all right, in fact, a religious duty to blow up the mosques, to destroy the religious schools of other Muslims, of the Muslims of another school, not unlike the pattern of Belfast. It's not enough to have faith, you must have the right version of your own faith, or risk death, mutilation, and humiliation, and the destruction, the immiseration, the torture of Iraqi society is something that all of us can read about every day. Suppose we're to go to Beirut, the pearl of the Levant, the most civilized and beautiful and cultured city of the Middle East, and to see what happens when, for politicized reasons, a sectarian constitution is in place which says that the president of Lebanon must always be a Maronite Christian, that the speaker of its parliament must always be a Shia, that its vice president must always be a Sunni, that the Druze must have their share, and so on, leaving out at the very bottom, I'm afraid, such forces as Kurds and Armenians, but making everyone defined in their citizenship by their faith. Do I need to elaborate what that's done to retard, to bankrupt, to beggar, to disfigure, and to degrade what could have been an ideally plural and diverse and happy society? Remaining with letter B, shall I say Banja Luka? Shall I say Belgrade? Or just say Bosnia? Again, one of the most civilized enclaves of the Balkans. For many years, protected by a secular constitution and the remains of what had been a secular and democratic republic. And just look what happens when it is decided that it is a matter of faith that determines your citizenship, your allegiance, your identity, your nature, your rights. See the recrudescence in the Europe of the late 20th and early 21st century of Catholic fascist parties we thought we'd left behind at Nuremberg, the Ustasha. The recrudescence of forces like the Chetniks, the Serbian Orthodox fascists who took exactly the same view except the other way around. See the craven way in which our spineless media, which always defers to people of faith, say that it was Serbs who shelled Sarajevo or Croats who shelled Mostar, when what they should have been saying was, today the Christian Orthodox militia bombarded an open city round the clock, or yesterday the Catholic forces shelled Mostar from dawn till dusk. They didn't do it because it's a matter of taste. We're supposed to respect people of faith, and we're supposed to respect them while they do this and do that and make this sort of excuse. There aren't enough words, in my lexicon at any rate, to express the contempt that I think any right-thinking person must feel for this conscription of this kind of medieval barbarism. Joan will tell me when I've got a minute. I don't know whether I'm yet trespassing on my rivals and my allies' time, but if I was to add Bombay to this list, the city that was very nearly ruined by the sectarian partition of India in 1947, 1948, where once again people were told it's a matter of faith what kind of Indian you are. You may have to become a Pakistani if you're Muslim. You may have to lose your life on the proposition. You may not just be a Hindu. Bombay more or less survived this, the terrifying ethnic cleansing and the pogrom that ensued when the subcontinent was mutilated and maimed and partitioned on this basis in the hopes of a genuine Indian unity and independence, ruined by way of appeasement of people of faith. But Bombay sort of recovered until recently, when now its name has been changed, its minority citizens persecuted, intimidated, driven out by a new Hindu nationalist party, the Shiv Sena, that says that, again, If you do not follow the right God, if you don't accept the supernatural as a real force in everyday life, you are not worth whatever it takes to become or to remain or be treated as an ordinary, democratic, civilized human being in, again, one of the great cities of Asia. Now, it's not part of my case, and I'm sure it's not part of Professor Grayling's or Professor Dawkins' either, to say that religion is the reason for all of this, or the exclusive or sole reason for all of it. I think it would be crude and reductionist to say that. But who is going to argue, I'll be fascinated to see, who is going to argue that the matter of faith, that the religious allegiance, that the preachings of religion have not in all these cases gravely exacerbated, gravely deepened, gravely poisoned and prolonged all of these things that have made our tenuous civilization extremely difficult to defend, uphold, maintain, let alone to advance. I don't believe this case could be made. That's for a simple reason, because religion is not provided to us by revelation. It doesn't come from the heavens. It doesn't come from the beyond. It doesn't come from the divine. It's man-made. And it shows. It shows very well that religion is created, invented, imposed by a species half a chromosome away from the chimpanzee. It shows, doesn't it? Well, why do we deceive ourselves on this point? And is there anywhere, I'm now going to wind up, is there anywhere of the places I've mentioned, and I exempt Basra and all the other bees I could take you around, where it wouldn't be enormously welcome if there was a mass conversion to secularism, or a mass adoption of the secular idea and principle, of the principles of Bertrand Russell, who once spoke famously from this platform, of Thomas Paine, of Thomas Jefferson, of Voltaire, and others. And I'll close by saying that I want you to be on your guard against two false issues in this respect, and I'll be very brief. When I mentioned those gentlemen, and I could mention some ladies too in this connection, like Mary Wollstonecraft, don't let anyone tell you that, oh well, secular tyranny is just as bad. After all, there have been fascist and communist dictatorships which have been just as revolting. Fascism, as you know, was supported by the Catholic Church all through its life, and in fact till after it had died, and still is defended by it. One of the leaders of the Axis was actually the Japanese leader, was actually a god. There's no way of saying fascism and National Socialism when the Axis was secular. And in the case of Stalinism and Maoism and the Khmer Rouge, the same mistake is made, and a religion is made out of man. It's the religious impulse itself that I think we need to oppose, to criticize in ourselves as well as in others. The argument from faith, in other words, the argument from certainty. So those of us who maintain this may not be described, my closing point, as fundamentalists or secularists, as certain cheap and demagogic and opportunist forces have recently been suggesting. We do believe in evidence, we do believe in skepticism, we do believe in reason, we hold our views with as much conviction and principle as any God-botherer does, but we are open to the argument and we're going to prove it tonight to you. And don't let anyone dare to imply there's a moral equivalence between us and the fanatics and the fools and those who think they know God's will and can tell you what it is, who are our enemies, and your enemies too. So, I beg to propose the motion that stands in our name. Thank you.
Christopher Hitchens presents a provocative argument that religion is the root of many conflicts, citing historical examples of sectarian violence and religious divisions. He contends that religion is a man-made construct, reflecting human flaws and biases, and that a mass conversion to secularism would be beneficial for promoting peace and unity. Hitchens' argument is compelling, but it raises important questions about the nature of religion and its relationship to conflict. While Hitchens is right to highlight the dangers of religious extremism, his argument overlooks the many positive contributions of religion to society. He also fails to acknowledge the complexity of religious beliefs and practices, reducing them to a simplistic narrative of intolerance and violence. Furthermore, his advocacy for secularism as a panacea for conflict ignores the many instances of secular ideologies fueling violence and oppression throughout history. Hitchens' argument also relies on a flawed assumption that religion is the primary cause of conflict, when in fact, most conflicts involve a complex interplay of political, economic, and social factors. By oversimplifying the relationship between religion and conflict, Hitchens' argument risks obscuring the deeper issues that need to be addressed. Now, let's hear from John Lennox, who offers a unique perspective on what makes Christianity different from other religions. Lennox argues that Christianity offers a distinct approach to acceptance and forgiveness, one that is based on Jesus Christ's sacrifice rather than individual merit. This perspective challenges Hitchens' characterization of religion as merely a human construct, and invites us to consider the transformative power of Christian beliefs and practices.
Science and religion, but there are different religions. Now, this is an immensely important question, because leaving Christianity outside altogether, religions do not agree with each other. It's idle to pretend that they do. Science is an international discipline. And of course, we are all aware of the sad fightings, even within Christendom, in my own country of Northern Ireland. So, I've got a lot to answer for in a way. And how do I approach this question? Well, in exactly the same way as everything else. I find, let's take the three great monotheistic religions. I have many Muslim friends and Jewish friends in many parts of the world. And when it comes to the resurrection of Jesus, there are three different views, as you know. The Jews believe, my Jewish friends believe, that Jesus died and did not rise. My Muslim friends believe he didn't die. And I believe that he both died and rose. They cannot all be true. How do you approach a question like that? Well, first of all, I step completely back from it. And I realize that there are two levels of difference between religion. And the first thing to recognize, ladies and gentlemen, as you go around the world, study all religions or none, people of any faith, philosophy you care to name, you'll find a striking fact. And it's that there's a common element of morality that's shared by almost every living human being. I've done a bit of research on this. And you will find the golden rule, do unto others as you would be done by, in every single religion, in every single philosophy, even Roman pagan philosophy, and in the fundamental statement of British humanism. You will find it everywhere. What does that tell me? It tells me that we need to respect each other's ethical code. Sometimes as a Christian, I can be put to shame by the moral integrity of someone of another religion. And therefore we approach this with great sensitivity. So that's the first thing. But what I notice is this, ladies and gentlemen, that the real difference comes not at the level of ethics and morality, so much as at the level of the basis on which a person can have a relationship with God. And there, religions and philosophies divide into two systems. One of the systems is a bit like Harvard University. There is an entrance examination. I presume you have an entrance, do you? Or do you just get in without an exam? No, you don't. So there's an entrance exam, so we can imagine that as a door here. And then there's the Harvard way, and it goes up and down, and you try and stay on it, and there are all the professors to teach you, and then there's a whacking great gate at the end. It's called final exams. Now, the whole principle on which the system depends is that of merit. The professors, all of them, are infinitely kind. And, but I hope they are anyway. But they cannot guarantee that you're going to get through the door at the end, can you? It depends on merit, your performance, your achievement. And many religions are like that, and their adherents tell me they're like that. There's some initiation rite, you get on the way, you try to follow the way, and you hope that then when the great assessment comes, and your good deeds are measured against your bad deeds, that somehow the good ones will weigh more than the bad ones, and you will be accepted into whatever is beyond. I know that's a slight caricature, but it's what many people believe. It's what many Christians actually believe. Now, I do not believe that at all. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the unique thing, it seems to me, about Christian faith is it's not based on merit. Because it does have a gate in a way, but at the beginning there stands Jesus Christ, who claims to have come into the world to die for my sin. Now, that's a very ugly word to raise in Harvard, but you did ask me about religions, so I'll have to give you the answer that I believe is the true one. In other words, let me put it this way. Suppose I did my first day at Cambridge, I saw a beautiful girl. I married her eventually. I suppose I went to her and said, Sally, do you know, I'd like to marry you, but here's a cookbook. Now, it's got a whole lot of rules inside it. Now, if you keep those rules fairly well for the next 30 or 40 years, I will think about accepting you. Of course, I couldn't possibly accept you now. But if you perform well enough, when the final assessment comes, I will accept you. Well, some of you are laughing. Others of you might be experiencing that. I don't know. But you see, that would be to insult her. The secret of my marriage, ladies and gentlemen, is this: that we accepted each other at the beginning, unconditionally. And because she doesn't have to keep the rules in the cookbook, so to speak, in order to gain my acceptance, that sets her free to learn to cook. And it's exactly the same with God. We wouldn't dream of basing our relationship with a fellow human being on a measured performance and an acceptance at the end of a long history of performing laws. And yet millions of people think that that's the way to base a relationship with God. And it seems to me here, and let me say it straight, Christianity competes with no other religion here. Because as far as I can see, Christ is the only person that offers me the knowledge of forgiveness right here and now. So in my life, I try to live for him, not in order to gain his acceptance, but because, ladies and gentlemen, I already have it. It's not based on my performance or my merit. It's based on the merit of Jesus Christ, who died and rose for me. And there, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll have to leave it. Thank you for your patience.
It's undeniable that religion has been used as a tool to cause wars, suffering, and pain throughout history. We can't ignore the fact that various religions, including Christianity and Islam, have been implicated in conflicts that have led to immense human suffering. However, it's essential to examine the root cause of these conflicts and not simply blame religion as the primary culprit. In the case of Christianity, it's crucial to distinguish between the actions of individuals who claim to be Christians and the teachings of Christ himself. The term Christian originates from the biblical account in Acts 11 verse 26, where the disciples of Christ were first called Christians in Antioch. This term signifies that these individuals were followers of Christ, emulating his example and living according to his teachings. However, as fallen creatures, humans are capable of great evil, including misusing faith to justify their own desires. This is evident in the numerous wars and conflicts throughout history that have been fought under the banner of Christianity. Yet, it's essential to recognize that these actions are a perversion of Christ's teachings, not a reflection of his true nature. Jesus taught us to love our enemies, turn the other cheek, and pray for those who persecute us. He demonstrated this himself on the cross, praying for the forgiveness of his killers. In light of this, it's clear that anyone using Christianity to justify war or harm is not truly following Christ. Hitchens argues that religion is the primary cause of conflicts, citing historical examples of religion fueling wars. However, this argument oversimplifies the complex factors that lead to conflict. Most wars involve a tangled web of political, economic, and social factors, with religion often being used as a convenient scapegoat. Moreover, Hitchens advocates for secularism as a solution to these conflicts, arguing that it promotes peace and unity. While secularism can provide a framework for coexistence, it's not a guarantee against conflict. History has shown us that secular ideologies can be just as divisive and violent as religious ones. The argument that religion causes wars is flawed. It fails to account for the complexity of human nature and the various factors that lead to conflict. As Christians, we must acknowledge the failures of our past, but we must also recognize that true Christianity is about following Christ's example of love, forgiveness, and compassion. By examining the life and teachings of Jesus, we can see that using Christianity to justify war or harm is a perversion of his true message. Religion's role in conflicts. While religion has been used to fuel conflicts, it's not the primary cause. We must examine the complex factors that lead to conflict and not simply blame religion. Hitchens provides historical examples of religion fueling conflicts. It's important to recognize that while religion has been a factor in many conflicts, it is often intertwined with political, economic, and cultural issues. For example, the Crusades were as much about political control and economic gain as they were about religious motivations. Similarly, the 30 Years' War involved complex political alliances and power struggles beyond religious disputes. Moreover, it's crucial to distinguish between the teachings of a religion and the actions of its followers. The misuse of religion by individuals or groups to justify violence does not reflect the true essence of that faith. Christianity, when followed according to Jesus' teachings, promotes peace, love, and reconciliation. Secularism's benefits. Secularism can provide a framework for coexistence, but it's not a guarantee against conflict. We must recognize that secular ideologies can be just as divisive and violent as religious ones. Hitchens argues for the benefits of secularism, suggesting that it values evidence, skepticism, and reason over faith and certainty. While secularism can promote these values, it's important to note that Christianity also encourages seeking truth and evidence. The Bible encourages believers to test everything and hold on to what is good, 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 21. Secularism has its own historical examples of conflict and oppression, such as the French Revolution's reign of terror and the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century. These examples show that secularism, like religion, can be misused for harmful purposes. While it is true that religion has been used to justify wars and conflicts, this misuse speaks more about human nature than the essence of religion itself. Christianity, when followed according to the teachings of Christ, promotes peace, love, and forgiveness. Individuals who use Christianity to justify violence are not true followers of Christ. Hitchens' argument that secularism is inherently better at promoting peace is also flawed, as secular ideologies have their own histories of conflict. Both religious and secular worldviews have the potential for good and harm, depending on how they are applied. As Christians, our goal should be to live out the true teachings of Christ and promote a message of peace and reconciliation in the world.